Almost every single editor will use a transition every once in a while, especially across Dissolve. Most editors I know like to fade in from black and then out to black at the end of their program. So let's learn how to add these transitions here in Premiere Pro. I will add a fade up to the beginning of this. To do that, all I have to do is go to the Effects panel, which is tabbed right here next to the Project panel. If you don't see it, go to Window and choose Effects. And from here, I'm going to go to the Video Transitions section. I will expand Dissolve, and now I'm going to zoom in to my timeline, and I'm just going to drag across Dissolve to this clip. As you can see, once I scrub, you can see it clearly fading up. I can also add transitions in between clips. To do this, I have to be in between the two clips. In other words, my playhead needs to be at the edit point. To go from edit point to edit point, I'm going to use the shortcut, which are the up and down arrows. Once I press the down arrow, I will go from edit point to edit point, even if a clip is selected, which is what we have in this particular timeline. However, I must warn you, if your track is not active, you won't be able to do this. In other words, your track needs to be selected. Notice that V1 is slightly lighter in color than V2. If I click on it, see how they are the same color now? Well, that means now that I have no video track selected, and if I go from edit to edit, it's because it's the audio. If I were to deselect the audio tracks as well, if I press the up and down arrows, nothing will happen in the timeline. Because I'm working with video and not with audio yet, I'm going to select only video track 1. Now if I go from edit point to edit point, I can use my down arrow or my up arrow if I want to go to a previous edit point, and the playhead will move to where I need it. Once I am at the edit point, I can use the shortcut, which is Control or Command D, to add the default transition. I will do that now, so Control D, and there you go. We have a transition in between those two clips. I will scrub so you can see it. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. If I want to make this dissolve a little bit longer, notice when I hover on top of one of the edges of the transitions, my mouse cursor is going to change appearance. When it looks like this, I can click and drag and make my transition longer or shorter, depending on how I drag. I can drag either side. But what determines the original length of this transition? Well, that's done in the preferences. So let's go there right now. Edit, Preferences, General. When this panel opens up, you will see under General that video transition default duration in my case is 10 frames. The default is 30 frames, which is 1 second. I will change it back to 10 because I like a shorter transition. The audio transition default duration is 1 second by default, but again I changed it to 0.5 so that it would be shorter. I like this transition duration like that, so I'll just click OK. So by default, my transition is going to be 10 frames. I'm going to click on this transition, see how it's selected, see how it's not. I'm going to select it and press the delete key to get rid of it. Now I'm going to place my playhead right at the edit point, and I will add the transition using the shortcut. Control D, Command D on the Mac. This particular transition is exactly 10 frames. If you double-click the transition, you can change the duration. I could type 20 frames in here, and once I click OK or press the Enter key, you'll see that my transition is now longer. All right, let's try it now with a different transition. So imagine I want to add one of the wipe transitions. I will add a clock wipe. I'm just going to drag it from the Effects panel to the edit point, and there it is. I'm going to scrub through it so you can see it. Fantastic. Same thing as with the other transition. If I double click it, I can change its duration to whatever I need. I'm going to cancel out of this, but if I single click on the transition, you will see now that the Effect Controls panel is showing me the properties of this transition. I can change where the clock starts the wipe. By default, it's going to be at 12 o'clock, so north to south. I can start it, say, at 10 o'clock, and indeed, that's where it's going to start. I can add a border to this. I will add it so that it is a little bit more obvious what it is that I'm doing. And you can see it. Let me change it to a red color so that it's even more clear what it is that is happening. And there it is. I can also change the clock wipe to start at, say, 9 o'clock, and that's where it's starting. I can also change the duration of the transition in here. It can be 10 frames or 20 frames or whatever I choose. I can change it in here as well. I don't have to start at 0%. That is 0% of the completion of the transition. Well, I could start, say, at 50%, and I could end at 50% of the transition completion. And basically, now I have no transition whatsoever. I just have clip 1 on top, clip 2 at the bottom, separated by a red border, which, by the way, doesn't need to be there. I'll change the border width to 0. Sometimes, and this is just sometimes, the easiest way to create some effects is by using a transition that doesn't transition at all. In other words, that starts at the same value that it ends. In this case, I'm going to change the duration of the transition to, say, 7 seconds. And now these clips will overlap for 7 seconds. That's not too bad. I could show the actual sources here in the Effect Controls panel, and it's going to show it to me with the videos. And again, the border width, which we saw. And I could even reverse it so that the top clip is at the bottom and the bottom clip is at the top. In other words, I am reversing the clip order. Depending on what transition you're working on, you will be able to change the different properties. Not all properties are available in all transitions, but this is not bad. I will select the transition and delete it. Premiere Pro comes with many transitions, and I'm not going to go through all of them. However, what if I don't like the cross dissolve to be my default transition? Maybe I like a dip to black. Well, we can easily do that by selecting the dip to black transition, now right-clicking it and choosing Set Selected as Default Transition. You will see that the yellow outline that was around the icon for the cross dissolve is now around the dip to black. If I were to use a shortcut to add the transition, like Control D, then it would be the dip to black. Let's try it. I'm going to select the sequence, and now I'm going to put the edit line at the edit point, and now Control D. If I were to preview this, you see that indeed is a dip to black. I'm going to go back to the cross dissolve. Another thing to keep in mind is this. If we were to select all of the clips and all of the tracks, and we were to go Sequence, Apply Default Transitions to Selection, we would get the default transition with the default duration in between each and every edit point. There's one, the other one, etc., etc. Not too bad. Of course, I don't like these many transitions, so I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And I will delete the transitions that I have. What if I want to replace a transition? If I were to add a cross dissolve and then I change my mind, I want to make it longer, I can do so, and then I want to do a dip to white instead. I can drag the dip to white and replace the current transition that I have. Well, it is the same when I add the transitions automatically. If I select all of my clips, Control or Command A does that, and now I go to Sequence, Apply Default Transitions to Selection, you will see that the cross dissolve is there instead of the dip to white. What didn't change was the duration of the transition. Sometimes we want to add transitions to titles. Let me go ahead and create a title. So Command D, Control D on Windows, and I'll just call it title. More on titles a little bit later. Right now, I'm just going to type a test title. So I'll just type the words test title. I'll select these and change the font. I'll change it to an Arial black, maybe even bold. I'll make this a little bit larger. And I will center it. I'm also going to center it on the title itself. And there you go. It's just a white title. This appears now in my project panel, and I will put it on track 2. If I wanted to add cross dissolves to this, all I have to do is select my clip and now use the shortcut, which is Control D. Right now, if I were to play this, the title is going to fade up, and at the end, it's going to fade down. Not too bad. I could add many titles and it would have the same effect. So I'm just going to add the same title again and then Alt drag it to make copies. I could select all of the titles at the same time and then use the shortcut, which is Control D. And now I have cross dissolves at the beginning and at the end of every single title. This works with graphics or anything else. I do like fading my titles up and fading them down. A quick fade. 10 frames is what I use. In the next section, we're going to talk about motion effects. See you then.